Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. It's the meeting of the Gloucester School Committee. We are meeting in Gloucester High School at 32 Leslie O. Johnson Road. Consistent with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 21, this meeting will be conducted by remote participation. The public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time and participate when necessary. If you are calling in on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you are watching on a computer or device, there is a raise hand button that you can tap or press to request to speak. Please use either of these options during oral communications to be recognized to speak. So with that said, we will do the salute to the flag. Please. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Also consistent with the requirements for this remote participation meeting, I will say that this evening in this room is Greg Bach, our Assistant Superintendent, Superintendent Ben Lummis, Minio, Melissa Texera Prince, me, Kathy Clancy, Sam Watson, Melvin, Mayor Greg Berga, and Laura Weiser. So that is who is physically present this evening. Okay. Oral communications is the next order of business. And for oral communications, if anybody would like to speak, the rules are the public shall have the opportunity at every regular school committee meeting to be heard under oral communications. Oral communications shall allow any resident who has a request or complaint of any nature relative to the school committee business to appear before the school committee, state their problem without debate, and the matter may be referred to the proper subcommittee. For items that are on the agenda, members of the public may address the committee with the permission of the chair. Persons speaking under oral communication shall be limited to 3 minutes each and shall submit a copy of their prepared communication to the recording secretary. The school committee chair shall not allow complaints as to individual performance or character. So if anybody would like to speak this evening, now is the time. And I do not see anyone raising their hand. So we will move on. Comments from the chair. I just want to say welcome everybody to a new term of the school committee. We have some new faces and I'm sure some new perspectives, which is awesome. I'm delighted and honored to be serving as the chair of this term. So on with the good work that we all want to continue doing. And the next order is recognitions. Does anybody have anything they would like to recognize? Okay. All right. Okay. And we have Gloucester High School Student Advisory Council. And tonight we have Kiara O'Connor with us. Thank you, Kiara, for being here.
Hi. So I'm Kiara O'Connor and I'm a senior at Gloucester High School. And I'm here to tell you guys all the stuff we've been doing at GHS, even with COVID going on. So first, in the Performing Arts Department, we have play practice going on every single day after school for the spring musical, which is Footloose. Super excited to see it. Also in Performing Arts, in December, Malia Andrews, who's a sophomore, was announced as the second place winner for the Massachusetts Educational Theater Guild's Excellence in Technical Theater Award for her costume design for Clue on stage. This past week, we had many NHS students who went down to the free food locker to help out. We also, this past week, the weekend, ROTC had a meet at Gloucester High School. Tonight we have a track and field fundraiser at Jalapenos. And for the junior class, every single class has certain holidays that they get to have fundraisers for. And the junior class has Valentine's Day, so they have theirs coming up. During the Christmas holiday season before break, the chorus classes and the band classes went to O'Malley Middle School to hold concerts. We also have had NHS tutoring going on, and we've also had Italian club tutoring. Yesterday I stayed after with 3 kids and they did well in their quiz today. So we also have a German exchange student at GHS, which is pretty exciting. Her name's Nella. She's awesome. We also had our Deca competition last week, which I'm a part of, and it was our district competition. So now everyone who is going to states in Boston, and the results were that Tallulah Obajano got 5th place, Dakota D'Oliveira and Cameron MacDonald got 2nd, Kira Berlin and Lily Muniz also got 2nd. I got 3rd place. Emily Correo got 4th place, Sean Bergen got 3rd place, Daniel Beaton got 2nd place, Emma Allen and Camilla Wilkins Bowens got 4th place, Brady Patton, Christopher Carvelis, and John Tavares got 1st. We also have the yearbook going on. All the students in the yearbook class are working really hard. All the senior class just submitted our baby pictures the past month, and we voted on superlatives. My boyfriend and I got class couple. We also have a door decorating contest about 2 months apart usually. The first one was held in December. We had a Christmas one, and that's when the senior class officers vote on whose door is decorated best, and the life skills class won 2nd and Miss Carvelis won 1st, and we also have another one coming up in February. And lastly, we just before December break, the GHS Health Center Youth Advisory Council made and distributed approximately 125 hand-decorated snowmen or ornaments as a small appreciation gift for GHS staff and teachers, with a little message on it saying how it represents joy and love and spending time with your family and friends.
Very nice. Does anyone have questions for Kia? That was a wonderful report. Thank you. We love hearing everything that's going on at the high school, and that was really a good breadth of all the activities. So we're happy everybody is busy and engaged and doing really cool things.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being here. You're welcome to stay, but you obviously don't need to. Thank you. Next item of business is the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they would like to remove from the consent agenda? Melissa?
I don't necessarily know that I want to remove it, but I just have a question on the field trips that are on the agenda.
Yeah, I do too.
So maybe we should remove it for discussion before we approve the.
Yeah, we'll remove the discussion first. Your question?
My question is, I'm just looking at these quickly and I'm not seeing the chaperones. So for instance, on the 1 to Daytona, Florida in April, I'm assuming it's during vacation. I don't see how it says substitutes are needed for the class for coverage. There's 61 students and left behind. Just trying to figure out how many are going and how many chaperones there are. Since 20 are going. And maybe it's because I haven't seen one of these forms in so long because we haven't been doing trips that I'm missing it. Right. But I just want to see for, it's costing $12,000 a student, there's 20 students going. What is the chaperone situation look like?
It would help with another student to staff ratio, right?
I also have a question on that.
Go ahead, Lauren.
So, and just is the $12,000 per student, is that standard?
No, I assume that maybe is not correct.
I thought I thought that until I saw it on both,
Right.
and then I wondered what this is about.
Maybe it's $12,000 total,
It's gotta be total.
and they're doing fundraising.
Yeah, I think that's more like it.
So for the first one, there are 20 students attending and 1 teacher listed. So is that appropriate?
Let us find out.
The question is also, is there a timeliness
Definitely is.
issue with respect to yeah, I think they may have given us this, I think the
They
same
did.
form got into our packet twice
Oh, right, yeah.
instead of,
So we don't see the Delaware.
yeah, we're not seeing the February 18th.
So I am.
It's not in our
It's
packet.
not in our packet.
So I just could have a different version. So you don't see the Clayton, Delaware one?
No,
And the Delaware one's in February?
It is, yeah. It was submitted on December 21st. So it was within 60 days, but hasn't come, not here with 60 days, but it's February 18th.
okay. So maybe you should share those details because it seems like it's timely and
Yeah.
they're not in our packet.
So it's 18 students. Master Sergeant DeVos is listed here as a teacher. You know, of course, Clayton, Delaware is for a similar competition. Cadets will be competing in a drill and color guard competition. Cost per student here is listed as $200. Funding source is the Marine Corps. Departing at 8 a.m. on the 18th and returning on the 19th at 3 p.m.
And they're driving?
1 second here. School bus chart.
So I just have a question.
Okay.
We haven't, as Melissa said, we haven't done one of these in a while. We're, like, I'm, excited for them to be able to compete in this competition. I think it's awesome. But we've been discouraging gatherings. So just wondering where this fits into that.
In terms of school activities, so we're not discouraging school activities. You heard about practicing for Footloose tonight. We have athletics going on, obviously. So we're trying to discourage activities that are not inside school because those are ones where folks are doing different things that impact school but aren't run by school rules. Okay, I mean, meaning our mitigation strategies. So we're not trying to minimize events. We're trying to minimize spectators at some events. What we're trying to, as everyone knows, maintain school as best as possible. Our JRTC crew troop is a tremendous asset to our schools and has been for literally over 100 years.
Right.
And they are really successful in what they do and really well led by the student leaders as well as Master Sergeant. So I've got a lot of confidence in this crew to do things well, and in some ways even more so than others because they know what it means to take an order.
Right.
So and I'm confident Master Sergeant will order them to follow all the rules, and they do a good job of being very responsible. I don't know the specifics around just the cost as the Daytona Beach one, but we can come back to you on that and clarify that. And transportation, that sort of thing. But as we do with all field trips, they'll follow the school rules in terms of masking and in this case distancing. We do drive on buses, not this long, obviously, but it's not for this crew. It's not something I'm very worried about. Very contained.
Same question. So the one that's in February, they're obviously staying overnight, right? So in terms of distancing, they're going to be sharing some space.
I don't know. So
Okay. So I
I
guess, or do we have any testing regulations around? Are they for both? I guess are we asking students to test before? Specifically, I guess I'm concerned about the Florida one. Would they have to quarantine down there? It seems a little bit of a hard. It would be tricky for them, I would assume, just if somebody tested positive in Florida.
Yeah. I mean, kids have gotten on trips before. I'm
Yeah.
sure, I'm assuming kids have gotten on trips before. So, you know, you have protocols for when someone gets ill, you know. I don't know that for a fact. I'm assuming over the hundreds of years that so that's happened before. But in terms of, I think, you know, testing and especially prior to the longer trip, you know, and then having tests available while they're down there, you know, take some, I think it makes a lot of sense. Particularly testing before, so no kids, so we know as kids get on the bus and start the trip that they're all negative, you know. And then presumably what should happen is that they're acting in a safe and responsible way, so people wouldn't get.
Yeah, I just don't want them to get down there and not have access to tests.
Yeah,
You know, it would be helpful for them to.
Who knows, for all we know, maybe COVID's done with by now.
You know how many times we've said that? We wish.
So anyway, but those are good questions. Any other concerns or questions folks have that you'd like me to follow up on?
Can I just follow up on what Sam was saying? Because it's a valid question, because if they do, I don't know if the procedure is when they're headed home, but if they do test, are they gonna tell the kid you can't get on the bus?
That's a great question.
You know,
Right, that is different than other
Yeah.
sicknesses, you're right. Great, we'll figure it out.
Thanks for clarifying. That's what I was trying to say.
I know what you meant.
Yeah, it's
I did
pretty
not think
complicated.
of that, obviously.
I just
so
was like,
thank you.
it's complicated if somebody has positive down in Florida.
That's very true. I mean, they might want to stay, who knows? Great. I'll come back to folks on that.
And by the same term as Delaware. I mean, anytime they're
Yeah.
going anywhere.
Yeah.
It's a much shorter trip, so.
You might have to take your Uber, and then that would be the $12,000
Yeah,
per
yeah.
student.
Great, we'll follow up and
Thanks.
bring it back together.
So we keep them on the agenda.
So we should probably remove the Daytona one and keep the Delaware
Yeah.
trip, since we seem to have more answers and more details, the
Yeah.
shorter duration of the
Yeah.
trip.
And then, but I'll also communicate with the committee on what we learned and also what we put in place for the first trip.
Okay, any other questions on the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda minus the trip to Florida.
Did you second?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, Maria, we need a roll call vote, please?
Chairperson Clancy,
Yes?
Mr. Melvin,
Yes.
Mr. Minio,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Verga,
yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
and Ms. Leeson.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Okay, so we move on to deliberations on educational issues and the superintendent's report. So you're up.
Thank you. Let's see. Right. So as we've said from the beginning of the school year, our mantra is everyday matters, and every day in school matters for each and every one of our students. Our primary objective remains, has been and remains, to safely educate all our students in our schools every day to maximize learning, address our students' full needs, and support community and family needs. And that probably has never been more important than right now to revisit that, but also reemphasize that. And I'll do so as we continue here. So my report tonight will cover a few areas. First, a COVID update, pretty substantial COVID update. Update to the committee on the FY 2023 budget development. Quick update on some major initiatives that are happening that we'll be putting in front of you over the next 8 or 9 months. And then update on the Gloucester plan for ongoing improvement. And I'll try to do my best as we go along to bring the new folks up to speed and as we go. So first, in terms of COVID update, we'll get a few things here: active cases, vaccination rates, our primary challenge for staff and student absences, what we're doing to respond to cases, and then also some support we put in place recently in the areas of testing, masks. We're hoping to get additional support for our nurses and also their substitutes. So here is the news on our active cases. We have 109 active cases, which is highest number we've ever had at one report. You see it's across the schools. I wouldn't say equally, because, Gloucester High School and O'Malley are much bigger places, but you see that, they don't have as many active cases proportionally as some of the other places. And you also have an outlier in East Gloucester of having only 3 active cases. The biggest surprise on this slide is the number of total cases. And even more so, the number of total cases we've had since our last school committee meeting. So a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago maybe, we had 197 total cases. As of now, it's 747. So 550 cases in less than a month. That, of course, is not unique to Gloucester or the Gloucester Public Schools. We're seeing it throughout the Commonwealth. But that is a big change, obviously. And I'll talk about some of the impacts on that in a moment. So you see that the changes over time, fluctuating, up and down a little bit into November. And then since then, I wouldn't say a steady increase, because it's been, sort of ticking up slowly just until December, and then the past 3 weeks, obviously, exponential increases. Or, not maybe exponential. Some of the numbers here, vaccination percentages, so that continues to go up bit by bit. You can see increase by 10 more percent, so 50% of our 6th graders. So we don't have reporting yet on the younger ones. We will at our next meeting. And the other ones upwards, 65%, and then 12th grade, high 70%. So, and you can see the last report on the right there. So, a little bit of increase there, particularly at 12th grade.
How did 7th go down?
7th go down. No, 66 to 67. I think 66 and 12, 15.
Oh, yeah, I'm reading it backwards.
It just wasn't lined up right.
Yeah,
How about
sorry,
that?
it's been a long day.
No, I meant smaller was like the previous one, but
Yeah.
okay, no problem. A weekly code safety check testing on this. You see percentages of folks who are enrolled. These are just students, by the way. It's just students. I've reported before students and staff. It's just students. So you see overall 42% of students are enrolled. That's much higher than we ever had last year at O'Malley. At O'Malley and GHS. You can see also how it's changing to some degree. Beeman had a lot more since 12-15. I think that's the motivating force of closing the school down, perhaps, but also offering, really pushing that pretty hard. Plum has been pretty steady, very steady at 50%. Others, GHS having almost 50% is quite good. There's some challenges I'll talk about in terms of our weekly COVID safety tests in a moment.
This is the pool test.
Yeah, pool testing. Yep, thanks. Yep, absolutely. So a primary challenge, without a doubt, for the last week and a half, the primary challenge has been increased student and staff absences, both challenging for their own reasons and their own ways. You see here, this is absence rates by school since since the January 4th. So, 5 days, I believe, and you can see that pretty steady last week. Low but steady. Dipped now yesterday, and then back up today. So you're looking at 90% rate down to 75% rates basically. And what we typically, so GHS has been 75 to 80%, a little bit higher today. And typically when we reported the attendance rate earlier in December, GHS was at 90%. So if they're at 75, 80%, that's the difference we see. O'Malley's been at 93% for the full year, and then this past week at 85% or so. Other folks have fluctuated. So Vets was doing pretty well last week. I mean, well meaning similar as same as others, down about 10% or so, and then took a pretty heavy hit last couple of days. So you see that's an impacting of 10 to 15%. Across the board, basically. That's for students. Staff absences, here we are for each of the schools since January 3rd, we returned from break. Things vary a fair bit, and just for this is all staff, not just teachers. So this is, paraprofessionals, could be a principal, director, secretary, that sort of thing. And it's for all absence reasons. So the only thing it doesn't include is long-term leaves. So that could be illness, that could be a COVID leave, that could be bereavement, that could be personal day, it could be any sort of illness, and certainly in Gloucester, we are experiencing COVID and other illnesses. You know, so it's a combination of those. These aren't just COVID absences, so I'm clear about that. And you know, the biggest challenge here has been the preschool. You see on January 6th, the high school definitely. The other schools, East Gloucester in the beginning of last week. O'Malley isn't actually too far off. Typical absences a little bit higher, but not much higher. A few people, 4 or 5 people higher, say. I'll say this, that between substitutes, coverage from other sorts, and then these aren't all teachers, obviously, our elementary and middle school are doing quite well with this. The big challenge is the high school, and you do see though that this is a downward trend. The last few days, I hope that continues. Things are getting better at that, but we really have had an impact. The absences have had an impact at high school. We communicated with families about this last week on Thursday. Students have had to have class in the auditorium, lecture hall, and or the field house, so not all 3 spaces every day. I do want to assure folks, when we tried to communicate this last week, that their space is far apart or further as they are in classes. Supervised at all times, and teachers are expected to assign work to be done during class period. That's not happening all the time. Sometimes that doesn't happen. For example, if a teacher is ill and it comes down with illness in the morning, okay, and aren't able to prepare work for students to do. But the expectation is that students should be having work to be done during those class periods. I'm not saying it's happening every time, but that is the expectation. And the number of students in classes varies day by day, depending on everything from the school schedule, which block is being omitted, depending on number of staff, which type of staff are out, the number of substitutes that are available that day, and then how coverage works. So this is not an ideal situation, and I can assure you that every high school that I'm aware of, and has spoken to superintendent recently, is doing a very similar approach. Not ideal, not much in our lives is ideal right now. I don't mean just our school lives, and but I think one of the questions folks have, and we try to communicate this with high school families last week, is why do we keep doing this? And even with lower attendance, we have 600 or so students in school. They are all learning in person with teachers, not all, or not every single day, because some folks are taking classes in that study hall version. But they're learning in person with teachers and classmates, the vast majority of them. As you heard tonight, they're participating in extracurricular activities, practicing musical, art, athletics, science clubs, competitions. Seniors are doing things like submitting their baby pictures and voting on who's their class couple. These are important activities, engagement, and connections that our students are doing. Students are getting all meals for no cost, accessing mental health support, which has been so important, connecting with friends, and then as well as we talk about in terms of community impact, school continuing on in person for those who are healthy to come into school. It allows families to continue their daily routine and their work, and that's really important. So these are crucial pieces. They happen best in person. The disruption to students and to families by going remote or having snow day, remote COVID snow days, which are really our only option at this point, would be much more. I might have a much greater negative impact. I think we learned that last year. It's again not ideal, but we do think that with 600 kids plus here at the high school every day doing this vitally important work, better to have them here. So I'll pause there, see if folks have questions, and I'll talk to you about
Laura.
So I just want to say thank you for, I love hearing sort of why it's so important to keep kids in school, given the challenges, and that's very helpful. I'm wondering about, however many, the 10–15% of kids across the district who are out. Because of course that's a large number, and some of those kids have already experienced learning loss. We're struggling still to build back.
Yeah.
Has there been any move from the state or anyone to somehow be able to, you know, educate kids who are home for a week or more? You know, because they can't come to school.
Yeah, we do, as we have typically, work we made available, can be made available, to students. That's one of the benefits of the using Google Classroom, so they can keep with assignments, that sort of thing. Can't obviously keep with the classwork. There is, no talk of streaming at this point. But so that's possible, it varies, okay, it's not a substitute. The high school is very much looking at it because midterm exams are coming up, and they're actively working together to figure out how to adjust those in a way, given the fact that so many kids are absent. That's probably the highest, the sort of matter of primary importance on students' minds, and also I think the faculty's minds, in terms of, because it's one of these moments that matter a lot to people, a lot of different levels, right? But they're actively working on how to adjust that, and I can't speak specifics of it. I don't want to misspeak, but sort of adjusting intent, purpose, impact, that sort of thing.
But just to follow up, just
Yeah.
to say with that, but for the younger grades,
Right.
It's harder for them and for their families to maintain focus. And I also know that it's harder to print things to go home right now because there's a toner issue
Yep.
at some elementary schools. So, and again, I know your hands are tied, the district's hands are tied to some extent
Yeah.
because of the lack of remote learning. But, everybody has been so sort of supportive and creative for kids who are home. And I'm just, as we sort of continue in this winter, it feels like, just kids are home.
Yeah.
And as much as we could get them would obviously be great.
And a couple things, I don't know, Greg, if you have, I just don't know, I haven't asked this question of the elementary schools and middle school, honestly. Been really more focused on high school recently, so I don't know if you have anything to add. I will say this is that we don't, if kids or staff are sick, we do want to sort of just be cautious around that.
Sure.
But with COVID, as we know, people are always out because they're sick or feeling sick. So
Right.
I'm not sure if not, and if not, we'll come back to give you some more information on that.
I don't have another suggestion other than that we do have tutoring available, services before and after school in different schools, so that if that additional support were needed, but no, I'm not aware of other districts doing short-term home, streaming into the home. It's would be quite a challenge to manage that with the shifting absences.
Right. I guess I know that when kids were quarantined last year, this may have been because there was remote learning happening separately, but I know that their teachers would do check-ins online if kids were quarantined. Not a class or a.
Right. The difference there is that we had that hour right after lunch.
Right.
All staff in the entire building were available.
Right.
Right now, they're fully engaged in teaching.
Right. No, I
So that kind of support would have to happen before and after school hours. And we'd have to design an entirely different program for that.
Right. No, I hadn't thought about the half days.
Yeah.
Of course, I think all the difference.
We've gotten sort of a number of emails, again, asking why we aren't going remote. And I think it would just be helpful for the community to sort of hear where the state is in terms of the expectations around remote learning,
Yep.
if that's shifted at all, and really how much the district has a choice in that matter.
Or it doesn't.
Or doesn't. I think it's really important to be clear about that.
Yeah. But also be really clear about why we are, why we.
Yeah, 100%, but I do think, there's only so much that we can do too.
Yeah, great. Very helpful.
Anybody else? So I have a question or a comment on, obviously, right, in the last couple of weeks, things have been very different than other times of this particular school year and last year. So I'm hoping that there is kind of continuing, evolving thought and attention on how to make sure we're making the most productive time for students. As Laura pointed out, things that could go home with some elementary kids and other kids. And at the high school, to the extent that we're kind of looking in to see who is leaving work for their students to do, right? Obviously, if a teacher is ill, we know that they're supposed to have lessons kind of planned ahead for when a substitute is in, or assignments for times when they're out just unexpectedly. They may be out longer than in the past, but hopefully there'll be some thinking around how to have a contingency plan for these kinds of situations where, there's a lot of kids with multiple blocks that maybe don't have, kind of, I think, some challenging work to do as opposed to just leaving it up to them to review their own work.
Yeah, we'll continue to follow up with it. Absolutely, very important.
And I guess I have a question / statement of filling some gaps for me. Does a teacher, and maybe Greg could answer this, does a teacher typically have lessons plans kind of laid out for a week, or is it a day-to-day thing, or how does that extrapolate?
And you're asking not necessarily due to related to substitutes or illness, but just in general, right?
Yeah, in general. Yeah. So if a teacher calls at 7 o'clock and 6:30 and says, I can't make it into that, is that lesson plan kind of in place already?
Generally speaking, yes, they plan well ahead. I can tell you that certainly at the elementary level, they're pretty careful about making sure they have things planned out well in advance, because they work with all subjects for the most part, and they have particular pacing. So they've got it usually mapped out a couple weeks sometimes. Middle and high, where they're more subject specific, and they may need to spend a little bit more time on one thing, or speed up on another area. They may flex, but certainly they are usually planning the week before, and things are pretty well mapped out for the following week. What teachers are supposed to do, and I saw last week, certainly was they're using the Google Classroom to post those assignments, and they should be able to continue right on. In the event that there's something that is a surprise, teachers are supposed to have a sort of backup plan that can be used for any purpose at any time. But yeah, generally speaking, they've got it mapped out, and they attach it to an email. If it's not in Google Classroom, they will email it or attach it in the substitute program.
Thank
you. Just to comment on the student absences. These are obviously not absences. Your y-axis isn't labeled, but I'm assuming these are
percentage of students who are in attendance.
In attendance,
Yep.
and the title is student absences.
Thank
So
you.
it's a little confusing.
Yep.
But also with staff absences on the next page. It'd be helpful to know what the normal complement was, or maybe what that percentage is of the staff. Because honestly, I don't know how many staff are required to operate the schools. Each school is different. So these numbers are kind of hard to digest.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. I can tell you that in the elementary schools, sorry, I'm just trying to pull up this presentation, but it's having problems for some reason. So in terms of what you're seeing there, so let me give a little context on the staff absences. So as I mentioned, O'Malley, you're probably talking about 5 or so per day. If you think about, so this is about double that. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. In terms of the elementary schools, you're probably talking below 5. Okay. Sometimes it's very something right around there. So you sort of get a context. We're more in a normal pattern, say West Parish, which is quite a good pattern at West Parish last few days. That's, around a little higher than normal, especially like 4 and 3 is probably typical, 6 a little bit high. EGS and Plum Cove are probably right around there, particularly because, I know that all those aren't teachers. You're talking 4 teachers, that's probably more than normal in elementary, but if it's a combination of staff, I think that's pretty standard there for the elementary schools. Maybe a little bit high for vets. So really the primary outliers here are really GHS. That's the biggest one.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm trying to say to folks, like, our staffing is actually considering what's going on. Our staffing is going quite well at the schools, except for GHS. And GHS is, it looks like a positive trend, slowly improving. So does that help a little bit?
Yeah, it's just, it's just hard to, just more of a comment going forward if we're gonna get these kind of reports.
Sure.
Understand it better with a little more context.
Totally get that.
It's encouraging that it's trending downwards. That's a good sign.
It is. I like to be hopeful, and and I'm not going to the bank yet. But it's encouraging. So the other thing that's encouraging, which I didn't put a slide up here on, because I don't report on it usually, was the paper, the Gloucester Daily Times, had an article on Monday, I think it was, about the wastewater results. That was looking at data from December 31st. But January 7th data has it going down pretty precipitously, quite dramatically. Again, not a trend yet. Hope it is, but we've always seen that the wastewater is a leading indicator of cases. Just about a week or 10 days, and so anyway, I sent that out to our leadership team and our nurses as perhaps a glimmer of hope earlier this week. So we'll see. We will see. Keep moving on here. I'm just having.
Is Brendan still here?
Not know why it's not sharing here. One more time. Okay, that's not true. All right, here we go. So then the next question is, well, how are we managing this? And it's really difficult. It's really difficult to manage to do the work, to understand COVID in our schools and support students, families and identify who needs to be, who is positive, that sort of thing. We hired contact tracers in December, and it's in quotes here because we really learned that it's very hard for these new folks to do contact tracing in our schools. They don't know the teachers, they don't know the classrooms. So really, they're being used to communicate with families, to give them information about what they have to do, how long they've got to be out, whether they need to test and stay or have the option to test and stay or not, how to get registered for the testing if they're not already registered. So that's what those folks are doing. We do have a nurse substitute, full-time one now. So we had a nurse at Beeman who was a long-term substitute. The nurse Liz has returned from maternity leave, and so Christine Houghton is now a nurse substitute who's essentially full-time.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and so she's been a big help, as well as Jeff Parker, of course, to deploy folks if there's an absence or if someone needs additional support. That's a big help. We've aligned our protocols in terms of aligning with CDC and Mass DPH. So now it's returning on the sixth day if symptoms are resolved. There's been no fever for more than 24 hours. And that still means some folks are coming back, others aren't. Okay. We are doing our best to track that. We are relying very much on people, doing the right thing here. We're not checking people as they come back in. We typically never have really, in terms of, but what we still have some controls on that they're not coming back before that, which we've always had. I will say this though, the other piece is some of the real difficulty here is that the contracted staff we have from the state. So for new folks, the state is supplying staff to do our symptomatic testing or test and stay and our weekly COVID testing or flu testing. We haven't had that full complement for at least a month. And that's due to initially was them ramping up, adding additional staff. The last week and a half is because they have absences as well. The state put in place, so we get a contractor called Metasource, who's been great to work with. And then because we're anticipating absences from Metasource, DESI supplying folks from the mobile testing unit, their mobile testing unit, to get us to our full complement. Even with that plan to add some MTU folks, we haven't gotten a full complement this week. That means that yet again, a lot of burden is on our nurses. Nurses, school secretaries helping them out, principals are always helping them out. So in working with Jeff Parco, really had to try to really understand what's the non-clinical help that nurses could use in their schools for a few hours a day. And so tomorrow we have a job posting now, we'll post that tomorrow. We need a graphic for it, maybe perhaps. Need a couple graphics, by the way. But also, folks have done a great job, the school committee and others, advertising our need for substitutes. And so we're going to need that same sort of push on this. Because if we can get some administrative help for our non-clinical work for our nurses, it'll help relieve some of the burden that they are really just, it's very, very challenging for them, and they're doing incredible work. So that's something we're working on to put in place now. It's been hard. These are great folks who don't necessarily want to let go of their work, and they want to perform and do it. But I think now have a real clear idea of some of the help that they can use.
I'm just wondering, I know you, on your next slide, and from talking to you, you got over 30 outreaches for our substitutes. I'm wondering if you can capture maybe some administrative helpers in that same pool.
Yeah,
I mean, I know one personally that is able to do that.
Great.
So maybe that's a conversation you have with Roberta to have with the applicants,
Super idea.
to see if anyone is willing to help out there.
And I have a feeling that when people really, now that we can be really clear about the help our nurses need, that a grade of non-clinical people could help with, I have a feeling that people will step up. People understand. I think people can understand what a nurses are going through to some extent.
And other people that I spoke to that applied just wanted to help.
Yeah,
It wasn't,
exactly.
anyway, what can we do to help? It's that community feel of.
100%, absolutely, that's exactly what I'm talking about, yeah. We also have distributed masks for staff. These are the KN95 masks that came from the state. There's been quite a bit of reports on where they're from and their effectiveness or not. They're typically, my understanding is they're typically still more effective than cloth masks, but from the beginning, it's always been people can choose their own masks. So we do have enough for the 20,000 of them. All the schools have supplies of them. People can take one a day if they want. And again, it's up to the individual whether they want to or not. We had 480 rapid tests for our staff supplied by the state. We have 200 of those left. We'll continue to distribute them to the schools, and they're using those for staff who may have symptoms. And then what has happened a few times is a staff member has been at home they need to test maybe symptoms, and someone's dropped it off for them. That sort of thing. So we'll do more of that, but all the schools will have some of these as well going forward.
And, sorry.
Have you heard, they've been stating on the news the past couple of days that there's going to be millions of tests coming to the state, that then it's going to be distributed to the schools. Have you had any outreach from the state
Not yet.
with that?
No, not yet. Typically, it's not, I expect that pretty soon. Typically, the DESI's pretty good about that. I mean, they're calling up in a couple of days or so as we get more information on that.
I mean, they did say some schools may not see it for up to 3 months, which to me is not as helpful as it sounds.
So yeah, I've only what I've read in today's newspaper is all I know at this point. They did, I think they were talking in the newspaper anyway about students for this time for students. So, but nothing yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on at one point we had discussed there was some, I guess it's some, I want to say back channel, but some discussion about test kits for lower income students or that population. Is there any, has that, any of that come to fruition, or is it?
Sure. So the city got an allocation that they distributed to various partners. The city allocation that came to us was specific for English learner families. We got 270 kits for that. In the past week, we were distributing at the high school, we were distributing to EL families through their students, so students been taking them home. And so we did that, I think, that might have been Thursday or maybe slated for Friday, could have happened Monday, okay, but that's just, recently. And we're also distributing them from, as families request, without outreach to families in different languages. And they can request them and come to the central office. And then today also is working with principals to make sure they know they're available and that they can distribute them from, to the EL families directly as well. So families have a couple of options there. So that continues, but that was about 300 tests, a little less than 300 tests just for EL families.
It's great to hear.
Just EL families though, not low income families?
That's the allocation we got from the city, and that's what specifically for that, that's all we got. Because other partner organizations, and I don't know them, Mayor, if you know more than I do.
You're talking about the batch that came around Christmas time?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the exact list, but it was just distributed to places like Action, the Open Door, other nonprofits, NGOs that do that type of stuff. And then a certain amount went to the schools. When I was stationed over there during the transition, I walked past stacks of them, but they were down to just a few boxes, and I think they're now gone. The next item Ben has is about the Stage 4 Park PCR testing you asked about earlier. So that's the effort we're doing now. I got to follow up with Max Schenk to see what's going on with test kits, because I too read the article about the state with, I don't know, it was 20 or 40 million, some ridiculous amount was supposed to be available. But nothing's come across my desk yet about that particular allocation.
Can I just respond to the mayor while the mayor's here, because this is a great opportunity to have this conversation, is going forward, if the city does receive more tests to the city as a whole, that if it's to be distributed to low income, that the Board of Health or the health department, whoever's distributing it, keeps in mind that a lot of families are in our schools, and that might be a good outreach to those families, as opposed to going to the Open Door or down on Emerson Ave. I think there was some down there. Schools have become the central focus for a lot of families, especially in the veterans neighborhood. And to know that those families that usually walk and not drive, can just go to the school and pick up a kit, might be very helpful to that family for them to test before they come to school and get in full testing.
Yeah, we can have a preemptive discussion. I think you're coming to the office next week to meet with Eric and Max in the meantime. But that particular batch that came through was specified to disadvantaged families. And I was just a transition mayor, so I don't know how the decisions were made, but it was to those 4 or 5 partners that we have throughout town. But that makes sense, because the schools are the central point for families.
Yeah, and I looked at the locations and they weren't really walkable necessarily,
Right,
so-
and they also weren't, open door service, whoever goes in there,
Right.
so you don't necessarily to be needy, you wouldn't say, test kit.
Mhm.
And that's some of the feedback I got, that was kind of what happened in at least a few cases.
Mhm.
So, when you have something like that and they say they have a vague, get it to the people who are needy, it's kind of hard for Max to get it in the right hands. So you start with the groups and hope for the best. But we'll have more discussions about if this next one comes to fruition, or if we decide, because it was determined at that time, the cities and towns could buy them at the state price.
Mhm.
I don't know how that's impacted by
I think
this.
that's what Salem did, right?
I'm not sure how Salem handled theirs, but the freebies are even better. So we will be bouncing on that one.
Thank you.
So next, that's the COVID update. Any questions before we move on to budget development? Okay, here we go. So we're beginning the sort of, as I've mentioned, public process of the budget development. So just a few things just quickly. The guiding principles for the budget or development of the budget for FY23 are listed here. We're connected to the development of the Gloucester School's plan for ongoing improvement. I'll update you more about that later today. That, of course, is connected to our priorities for student learning, student support, and high quality instruction. Another guiding principle for the budget development for this year, as was last year, and probably will be for as long as I'm here, will be moderation and financial prudence. Prudence are a must, especially because we will expect to continue to have unanticipated expenditures due to COVID. I know I'm predicting COVID's done in April, but that might not be the case. Another piece that's been a priority this year and is an impact on next year because of the labor agreements we come to is improving recruitment and retention of staff. One of the variety of ways we're doing that is by increasing salaries, particularly among our non-professional staff and our lowest wage workers, our operations staff. School committee in the last 6 or 7 months has done great work on those salaries. And that obviously will play out in the FY23 budget as it needs to. And then the last one is just building a budget with an eye towards FY25. That's when our federal relief funding ends in the beginning of FY25. And so you'll hear me and Gary Frisch and others talking about how we're absorbing into the operating budget some of those positions that are now being funded by federal dollars, federal grants. So we'll talk more about that. So that's the sort of basis. What we're doing now, here's the schedule. We're right now, our leadership team has been presenting to the B&F subcommittee about their priorities and sort of the underpinnings of the budget. I'll talk about that more in a second. But you see here that we'll be presenting numbers in the actual budget January 26th, and then month by month in terms of more work with the school committee, public hearing, ultimately a vote that sends the budget to the city council and mayor, and then final vote to adopt the school committee budget. What we're starting now, so get to present day, yesterday, also tomorrow. You're welcome to tune in if you want. At the B&F subcommittee meetings, we're doing 3 things really. Essentially beginning the public part of the process, updating the committee on the work done so far to develop it, as we're doing tonight, and then providing the committee, the subcommittee really, with the basis of what the budget is being built on. And that is our strengths, our priorities, and our ongoing efforts to strengthen those priorities across each department and each school. So we have our department heads come, our principals come. Last night was the elementary school principals, special education and English learners. Tomorrow will be O'Malley, the high school, and IT. And last week, food service, transportation, preschool,
Special development.
and teaching and learning. Were last week. And what these presentations are not about are giving numbers yet. Okay, they're really giving the foundation of what we're building the budget on, and what we will see, or we are seeing, is how there's connection and coherence across the schools and departments. So English learners is something that comes up again and again. Social emotional learning comes up again, and also professional development and supporting our instructions, particularly our tier 2 and tier 3 supports and intervention. So there are things that come up through this process that then we're looking to prioritize or fund in the budget. Not necessarily the new dollars, but how we're allocating the existing dollars as well. So that's what we've been doing here for the last 3 meetings, or last 2 meetings. Tomorrow's meeting is going over these in each department, in each school. So as I mentioned, the strength areas of priority, and then also the work being done currently, and also the work to further strengthen those priorities in the upcoming year. And then, as I mentioned, January 26th at Budget and Finance will be the actual budget, numbers and dollars, the draft budget, recommendations for any additions, and then numbers on some of the big ticket items such as personnel, district tuition, circuit breaker, and then our federal and state credits. So just a quick update on where we are. Any questions on that? We'll also share the presentations. The B&F subcommittee have them, but tomorrow, the next day, we'll give the other members access to those presentations as well. And they're also being recorded too. A few more things. These are major initiatives. I just want to keep the committee sort of up to speed on where we are, and also the new members a little awareness about it. So this is some of what I spend my day each day on, are these things. So we've got a pretty ambitious 6, 7, 10 months ahead of us. First of all, the GPS plan for ongoing improvement. I'll give you a more detailed update in a moment on that. Naming of the new school. So you see here what we're working on in January and February. The school committee adopted the process to name the new school in December. This month and next, We're forming the student-led nominations committee, and then we'll open the public nomination process as well. You have a timeline for that. I can share the timeline with the new members. That the anticipated completion date of that is June 2022. It's June. The monitors of Beaman and Plum Cove. I'll give you an update on those. We're meeting with the DPW tomorrow to get a full update. They will lead that process, but obviously we're working closely with them. But in terms of just the timeline and the steps of the process, we'll give you a more complete update probably at next meeting. That's scheduled at this point still to be completed by the next school year. Playgrounds at Beaman and Plum Cove, continue to meet on that. The schools have both been getting input from their communities, parents and students and staff as well. We'll complete that community, that input process this month, identify the components and then start the bid process for that. And those are supposed to be slated to be installed in the summertime. The long-term plan to Blackburn. If members will remember that in the fall, we got information from you that you wanted, what information you wanted in order to make a decision, a long-term decision on to Blackburn and its uses. And we'll be gathering that information over the next couple of months and then bring it to you in a March presentation for decision sometime before the end of the school year on the long-term plan for Blackburn. Merging EGS and vets, this is longer term work, so which won't be completed September 2023. Merging two staff, two cultures, two organizations is always ongoing, but we will continue to have leadership meetings this month and next. Continue to begin building some of the connections between the staff, and then also identify all the areas that need alignment. So that'll be year and a half plus. O'Malley Windows, we make the initial submission to MSBA, which will allow us to move to the design phase. Working with the DPW on a couple of matters on that. The most important piece, which you've already approved in the operating budget for this year, is the money to do the design process of that. But that's already been approved, as we discussed and gave you an update on in December. And then updating school assignment zones in advance of the new school opening. We'll have to adjust school assignment zones, and so we'll go through a process of that, which will finish in October 2022. In advance of any enrollment and registration for next year. What we're doing now is just we're just beginning the groundwork on that, which is gather necessary data about our school assignment zones, where folks live, what grades they are. In the next month or so, we'll develop a guidelines criteria, which we'll share with you and get your input on. But we do have to adjust school assignment zones and see what we can do about some of the streets in downtown, which have at least 3 schools, if not more. So try to add a little clearer logic in those, but also obviously at the very least, you've got to combine 2 school zones, but it makes sense to look at what we can adjust at the same time. So
Which is not an easy task.
none of these are easy tasks, obviously, right? So
Lauren has a question.
yeah,
Just one question I have to ask. So on the playgrounds.
Yeah.
Is there any hope, and it could also be a supply chain issue, that any of that could happen, especially being that there's already done so much research before the summer?
I don't know, honestly, and I would say unlikely. If we weren't in a pandemic,
Right.
et cetera, I think perhaps we could accelerate that. But there's also there's the public procurement process as well.
Right.
Which really have to, we of course have to abide by, but that just it's not a short process.
Right. Okay.
So last piece, update on our plan for ongoing improvement. All this will be background. So the plan for ongoing improvement will be a 3-year plan for what we are positioned to do and take on and achieve over the next 3 years. It's based on the work done on my entry plan. And just to remind folks, my entry plan really identified a few important pieces about where we are. We have a very strong foundation at our elementary schools, and also in terms of our district culture. It's a strong and positive culture. It's built on trust and camaraderie and compassion. And I keep on reminding folks that these are important things. They don't exist in all schools. They don't exist in all districts. Many places have to build those things, okay, or rebuild those things. But because we have that approach in our schools and our district, we really can go from here. We're well positioned because of the great work, the progress that the We've been making it at K to 5. And also because O'Malley and GHS have looked at closely and identified their paths forward. Now it's a question of continuing on those and doing them well. We have really important work to do, especially about engaging students more deeply in learning and also improving academic achievement and also supporting our increasing diverse learners. And then probably the most important challenge is how do we stay focused on doing a few things really well and making progress. That requires a really strong plan that's doable and as well as ambitious. Our draft strategic priorities, which are building our plan based on, are the needs to continue strengthening instruction and deepen student engagement, to strengthen student social emotional learning and mental health, and supporting our most vulnerable students. Those three things together, as we make progress on this, will lead to improved student achievement. And then it's always essential to make sure that folks know about the great work our students are doing, our students and our staff are doing. So in terms of creating a plan for ongoing improvement, a few things are essential. We have to get input from people who are doing the work and who are, care about our students. So I'll show you in a moment who I've been reaching out to and working with, or who we've been working, because it's been Mr. Bach, Katie Provo, myself, and others. It's essential in this plan to build on what we're already doing and not just start new things, just start new things. It's essential that we limit the number of scope of brand new efforts. Okay, there's some things we have to start, but a lot of things we have to continue and do better. And as I mentioned before, staying focused on a limited number of high impact efforts rather than just doing more and more things. Schools fall prey to that way too often. So the benefits of a plan for of a focused plan for ongoing improvement are listed out here. Really, we want all staff, students, families, and the community to know what we're committing to over the next few years. That's going to really deepen student engagement and improve student learning. You want to be transparent about that and clear about that, so people can look at it and say, "Oh, that's what you're doing great," and then then we can report back to our progress we're making. That also allows us to plan for, budget for, allocate the resources and staff training and support necessary to achieve our goals. And then also having a strong and focused plan, clear and focused plan, allows us to maintain that focus and not get sidetracked into new initiatives, new efforts that may take us off of our targets. So in terms of the work so far in developing the plan, we've met with PTO and parent site council leaders, met with a community partners group, and then met with groups of faculty from every place except for GHS and preschool so far. Okay, these have been sort of small but strong and experienced groups of staff. It's optional and voluntary for folks that come to these meetings, so it just varies. But the folks who have attended have been committed and very, very helpful with a lot of great input. I'll give you an example of we are asking folks to give us input on 3 areas that are most related to that, in this case, school level. So elementary, we asked in these 3 areas: strengthening tier 2 and tier 3 support, more closely connecting general education, special education, and then supporting students' social, emotional learning, mental health. At O'Malley, we asked about these 3 topics: improving literacy skills across subjects, expanding student voice and choice, and also professional collaboration. These are things that are very closely tied, in O'Malley's case, to their improvement plan. So I'm not asking for new areas, okay, asking how we can focus the areas they're already working on, okay. It's not important to do more new stuff, but really get better at what they've already planned to do. And then we asked 3 sort of simple questions. What's the most important work we're doing now, from your point of view, in that area? What are we doing that we should stop doing? Okay, and then what is the most important work in this area that we should start doing? And then we'll go through a process, pretty simple process of prioritizing responses. Instead of just getting a list of things, we also get input from everyone who's attending on what's most important in those areas. Just quickly, at the elementary schools, across elementary schools, a real desire for a social emotional learning curriculum that's up to date, more relevant. We mentioned last night at B&F. You heard about Second Step, which is a little bit out of date, but everybody's saying that, and everyone's saying you need more support, and because they really do see the need to help kids learn skills, whether it's resilience or it's perseverance, or whether it's, teamwork, collaboration, that sort of stuff. Learning about anxiety, that sort of thing. So that's just one example of something that, when it comes up across all schools, we obviously have to really take note of.
Okay. We've talked about this sort of in the past, but while we're thinking about a new curriculum for social and emotional learning, I hope the goal will be for it to be a consistent, sort of golden thread from preschool all the way through high school, right? Like that the language is similar, that it sort of grows with the school, so that each school is sort of doing something similar versus everyone doing something differently. Just a comment.
Yep. And Amy Can will be at our next meeting, and she's leading the efforts as we sort of test out a pilot. And we'll talk, and the answer is yes. And we're looking at a program curriculum called Trails right now, and is a pre-K through 12 curriculum. That's one of the reasons we're looking at it, because it has that common thread. Yep. So the next steps here will be complete the school meetings and then set up smaller teams in these areas to take the input we've gotten and develop the plan from that, and then then share that back out to the school committee first of all, and not first of all to the school committee, but also our community partners again, and our parent leaders group, and also our schools, and get a sense of, are we on the right path? And then we develop benchmarks, deliverables, and outcomes for each area, and then you guys see that, discuss it, and then it's up to you to approve whether or not you want to approve the plan. So, but that's just a quick update on that. Taking longer than hope, because it's hard to move long-term projects ahead when you are responding to the
I was just gonna mark out a question, Ben. The proper procedure is to be recognized by the chair. Community partners, give me an example of who a community.
Oh, yeah, sure. So YMCA, Wellspring, the food pantry, I'm missing some. Pathways, thank you, yeah.
JRI.
Okay, good.
Probably a few others that I'm missing.
I get the gist.
Yeah, some of the great groups that support our families outside of our schools and really support the community, and have most of those for many years in a variety of ways. So, yeah, good folks.
And I have a question. What are, I know you have PTOs on your list. What is your approach with high school parent groups?
So high school has represented, high school, middle school represented at that. But what we have, what you remind me again is checking with students and high school students and getting input from them, which we haven't done yet. But haven't done additional outreach to high school families other than through the parent leaders group.
I don't know how many are on there. I'm just thinking it's a lot, it's the biggest school.
Right, yeah.
And so is there adequate representation?
There's more than I've seen in the past from high school. Okay, it's not. But if you have ideas on how to, access more, or that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's everything for tonight.
Okay. Do we do a motion to accept the superintendent's report? We used to.
Yeah.
Should get back to that.
I haven't since I've been here. You're welcome to.
All right, I will entertain a motion to accept the superintendent's report.
So
Second. Maria, roll call vote, please.
Chairperson Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Melvin,
yes.
Mr. Minio,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Verga,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
and Ms. Weason.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of really good information. We will move on to subcommittee reports, and we have had a special meeting of the Building and Finance Subcommittee, and Chairperson Sarah Prince is going to report on the meeting from January 6th. We did have another meeting yesterday, but it's not on the agenda, so that will get covered next time.
Thank you. So as Kathy said, we met on January 6th, and the new BNF subcommittee consists of myself, Kathy Clancy, and Bill Melvin. And a lot of discussion on how these meetings were approached was already described by the superintendent, so I'm not going to go into that and just talk about some highlights from the different departments that we heard from that day. And know that the departments that we met with, which was preschool, transportation, food service, professional development, those department heads met with the superintendent and the CFO, Gary Frisch, prior to coming to our meeting. So it was a really structured meeting. And I just want to start off by saying, we have incredible staff in our school. I mean, if anything came through these discussions, it wasn't so much about budget and money, it was about all the dedication by not only the department heads, but by the staff that we employ in our school district. The department heads couldn't say enough about the teachers and the paras and the bus drivers and the food service workers. So it was just really nice to sit and hear how awesome that we're doing during probably one of the most difficult and challenging times school districts have ever faced. So if there's ever a time to give kudos to our staff, there's no doubt that now is the time, because it's being recognized by many. You know, it's not just a little bit here and a little there, but every department is working very well within their department and with other departments, and it's just amazing what's going on. So the first department we heard from was preschool, which was presented by Anne-Marie Jordan, our preschool director. She said it was an unusual 2 years, not like we didn't know that, because of COVID. The program focuses primarily on developmentally age-appropriate skills. The program has a great reputation. There's a really good team approach. There's a lot of great social emotional program going on within that age group. They've had an increase in enrollment. Peer models are coming in, because as you know, we have peer models and other students within the program that we have to attain a certain ratio, and that seems to be working well. We did talk about the challenges of half-day programs versus a full-day program, or allowing the students, preschool students, to come in 4 days versus 5 days. And some of those challenges included, if we went to 5 days, there wouldn't be time for the evaluation of the 60 or 70 students they do per year. The staff wouldn't be as available for IEP meetings and evaluation, and planning and prep time would be more challenging. So that's not to say that we wouldn't do 5 days, but those were the issues and boundaries that we discussed from going from 4 to 5 days. The next department that we spoke with was transportation, and as you know, we have a new transportation director, Laurie Francis, who was very inspiring and enthusiastic about her job. You know, I think she's been on the job 2 months now, and she seems to be adapting very well. She spoke very highly of Cameron. Cameron, and I'm sorry, but I don't know his last name. Locke. He's the new transportation manager. That's the new position that we approved not too long ago. And coincidentally, he comes from Maine, where Adam Mayo came from. So as you know, Adam, our previous transportation director that just left us, must have let Ms. Cameron know that we were seeking good help, and he seems to have found someone, because Laurie and Cameron are having a really good time working together, and seem to collaborate well. So we
Can I
just,
point out one thing?
Yeah.
And the team is working, as you said, and then one example of that is yesterday's handling the cold very, very well.
yeah,
They're out there early, the mechanic just in case, and things went up very, very smoothly yesterday. The coldest day we've had in quite some time.
which is awesome to hear. We discussed the busing program that we have, which is, I believe, called Traversa. It's a very valuable tool for efficiency. We talked about Ride 360, which is an add-on for Traversa. That program, which I believe is coming, I couldn't tell if it was an ask or if it's already
No,
coming
we have it in
to the
place.
budget.
It's about rolling it out. They're gonna start with veterans, I think.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is an add-on to the program we already have, which families can sign up for, and they can have direct contact regarding transportation issues with the families. For instance, if a bus is going to be late, or if it's delayed, or if there's a different driver, or a different, if there's a bus number change, this information can go right out to families, and there's a way to have back and forth communication. which we know is very comforting for our parents, especially with the young kids that are on our buses. We talked about the great part-time mechanic that we have on site who has been extremely helpful, especially during COVID. Because as you know, it's tough not only to get products to us, but to find services as well is difficult. So having that part-time mechanic has been a huge asset for us to get immediate repairs to the buses that we have. One of their asks was very creative, I must say. I don't think I've ever heard this in my 14 years of being on school committee, was they're suggesting that we create a full-time position of a bus driver. And how that would work is that the time that they're not driving buses could be filled in by being like a noon supervisor or a crossing guard or something, trying to create some full-time positions, not all, I don't believe.
Yes,
There wouldn't be
bus
enough.
drivers or bus monitors.
Right, and that way it would attract more employees to the workforce to have a full-time job as opposed to a couple hours a day. So I thought that was extremely creative. We talked about purchasing 7D, not 70, because I had this question, 7D vans, which are used for out-of-district transportation. As you know, our out-of-district transportation costs are very high. And this would be a way to reduce some of those costs if we had our own vans. Those vans, to be a driver on those vans, it's less training time than a bus driver. So it might be a more attractive position for someone that wants to work in the school district, but doesn't want to put in the many, many hours it takes to be a full-time bus driver. And then again, back to the Ride 360, we talked about the real-time communication with families, and that was something that they see as a priority. The next department we spoke to was food service, and we have the awesome.
Oh,
you have
that's
a question?
Yeah, just a quick question about that. For Ride 360, when Adam was here, we talked about an add-on of GPS. I don't know what the word is, adding GPSs to our school
And
buses.
take GPS tracking.
Yeah,
Uh,
is that part of the ask so that parents can have real-time updates on when the bus is coming?
I don't know. We are meeting, Gary Frisch and I are meeting with Lori and Cameron next week. And to go through all that recommendations. And so we'll look more into that one. I just can't remember. I think you've got to do something in addition to what we have. I'm sure you have something in addition to what we have right now.
Yeah,
I'm just not sure exactly,
yeah, I remember him saying you had to add the actual GPS tracking
Right,
to
right.
each bus, but I
Yeah.
didn't know if that was part of this.
Yeah, no, this is, we already, the ride that we already have in place. It's a question about rolling it out, not the GPS.
I thought with the software they were talking about, maybe that there was like real time.
Communication with a bus driver.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that could go to the parents somehow.
Yeah, I don't know if it's real time communication with bus driver, the parent bus driver communications.
No,
We're very worried about that.
yeah.
No, but meaning that it's more about the updates of changes, that sort of thing, or delays, that sort of thing. And a delay, and so in that case, it's actually, I'm not sure about this, but it's probably coming from dispatcher, Cameron or Lori, who know it's delayed, they're pushing it out, folks. But that's the real time is sort of on delays.
And the real time would be them being able to contact the bus driver to say, what's going on, not the family member, but Laurie or.
Well, now they do that through the radios. Yeah, so that's already in place.
The next department was food service, and we have Martha Jo Fleming as our food service director. The strength that she talked about was the conformance of the program has been doing well with sanitation and safety and certifications. The concerns we talked about was equipment challenges. We were talking about mixers and steamers at the high school, grease traps, slicers, warming cabinets. There was a discussion about the potential purchase of a generator to preserve food in 2 walk-in freezers that we don't have right now, which means food can go bad when the electricity is out. I believe that they're looking to do generators at Plum Cove and O'Malley. We talked about the Mosaic program, which is a program that we already have, where we will put TV type screens above in the food service areas so that students can see what is available for food for that day, a menu per se. So we're working with IT to get those monitors up and running. Long-term, 3 years out, there is, was it generators too? There was a piece of equipment that cost a lot of money. That was like 3 years out. I think that was a generator as well too.
Like a line server.
Yeah, the food service line.
Yeah,
The
the,
big steam tables, yeah, I
um,
think a big food service line.
the service line. Yeah, exactly. There was a 3-year plan to get some information on that. I'm sure we'll hear more when we get to the.
Plan may
cleanup
be
meeting.
exact, maybe optimistic, there's we know we need it, to put it that way.
Yeah.
Not to the plan quite yet.
We also talked about the type of food service programs we have for families. There was an SSO program, which is a seamless summer option, which I believe we currently use. And if I'm not mistakenly, I believe yesterday we were informed that the rate increased. I saw Martha Joy yesterday, just said that rate did increase, so we're getting a little bit more reimbursement right now. There is another program that's being talked about. It's called the CEP program, which is the Community Eligible Program, which is available nationally. And we're monitoring right now which states and which groups are jumping onto that program where low income is not free. There's a percentage reimbursement for it, as opposed to the SSO program where there is 100% reimbursement, or there is free lunches. So I don't know when that decision has to be made. That was a little bit unclear, but it just seems like we have an option, some options to look at going forward.
It may not be options, it may be one program or the other.
One versus the
One is
other.
the state sort of decision to pursue an effort, which is a community eligibility provision. And the other one is the federal program. And it really comes down to what the state participates in. What the state decides to participate in. And that, my understanding is tied to what the feds do.
Right.
With the feds have an increase in your rate and then continue to extend the free meals, we'll probably most likely stick with that. But if changes have to happen, we'll bring them to you and to understand the financial impact, if any. But this, as we do know that the reimbursement was increased, was it announced that we increased, but the feds will increase by 25 cents per meal, which is, helps our bottom line certainly. But any of those impacts on our revenue and our program, we'll let you guys know.
We'll be monitoring that. And the last group that we met was professional development discussion, which was led by Assistant Superintendent Greg Bark, who praised his staff for the enormous amount of work that's being done. He recognized the teachers, the paraprofessionals, the clinicians, just stating overall the enormous amount of work that is going on within the district right now. They're looking to be focused on improvement going ahead. There's not a significant increase to the budget with this department. The ask that they have will likely or mostly be funded by the SLIP 3 grant, and please jump in, Greg, if I say something out of line. There's a lot of information we were taking in. We have sustainable improvement programs at O'Malley and GHS. We're talking about full day SPED training. I believe that was one of your requests for professional development. Also with the LA, math, science, responsive teaching, and just we had a discussion about whole group and small group interventions. And if there's anything you want to add, please feel free to that conversation.
I think just the big one was the K-5 ELA curriculum.
Oh, yes.
Pilot that we're doing this spring, hopefully with a decision in March 1st or early March. And that'll be probably the single largest undertaking for next year and involve lots of training. But the program itself is budgeted in ESSER 3, which would have been a pretty significant expense.
Right, and I believe that's what the elementary teachers were talking about too. As well. There's a lot of overlap with the
Elementary
departments.
principals
So you get more detail from one and
echoed a
another
lot in
group.
there, yeah.
So I'm going to highly recommend, especially for the new members, to watch these meetings on Zoom because there's a lot of information to take in, and it's good. We're not hearing the struggles really. You're hearing how good we're doing and how we want to improve on the good work that's been done. So it's actually a good feeling this year going through the budget process. just seems like we're really focused and on a good track, and a lot of kudos to our district for being where we are now compared to where we've been in the past, so lots of good work.
Thank you. The budget, you mentioned 2025 federal funds are going to be, so what is that from? I'm sorry.
So we're getting now, because of the pandemic, really.
No, okay, that's what I.
Yeah, it's all because of the pandemic. And so the one I'm referring to there is what's called ESSER 3. I'm sorry, I can't remember maybe you can remember what ESSER stands for. It's essentially emergency relief because of COVID.
They're projecting to 25, we're gonna need the help apparently.
Yeah, and what that allows us to spend those dollars through FY '24 and ends at September 30th, 2024, which is FY '25, okay? And what we'll get you guys up to speed on is that those dollars are spending quite a bit of dollars on positions in terms of extra support needed because of the pandemic. And that's everything from social emotional coordination of social emotional learning and mental health support, interventions and tutoring, curriculum efforts as well. We can spend on a whole range of things, but it does disappear after FY '24. And so in this example, we're trying to, so some of the positions that are on that grant, we want to, not all of them, but some of them absorb into the operating budget. And try to do that year by year, so that you don't have a cliff essentially, where we either have to cut all those positions, or we're trying to absorb a lot of positions at once, in one, from one fiscal year to the next. So, but we'll give you more detail on that as we go forward. But that's what I'm talking about, those federal COVID relief dollars. Yeah.
There's a couple meetings too. There's a program subcommittee meeting and maybe one other that we can find the links to, but you sort of went into like greater detail about ESSER and that sort of benefit of all of these. We didn't really have that going into it. We can just send you some links to some meetings that go over some of this in more detail.
If there's specific areas, entry plan or ESSER funds where three of you want more information, happy to get links to things, give you documents and sort of stuff.
Yeah, there was a document that came out August 24th with ESSER 1 and 2.
Oh, actually, and the other piece is
2 and 3.
It's on our website, but I'll send you the link. It has all the school committee presentations from this year.
Those are very helpful.
Yeah.
Bill, you had a question?
Yeah, and just because I'm curious, Ben, what's the dollar figure on that grant? What are we getting?
Oh, for ESSER 3, $4.4 million over the, between now and last year, really this fiscal year, FY 22, 23, 24. Yeah, plus ESSER 2 was I believe $1.6 million. And that's was expended last year and this year, this current year. So yeah, those are the sort of round numbers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you have that as a separate budget, correct? Didn't you list a lot of the ESSER money in a separate budget?
Yeah, we gave you a separate report about what we're spending on each of those two grants. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll update it as we go along.
Well, and through the budget process, we look at the grant funded things as well. So it's.
Yeah, and we'll be very clear about which ones we're taking off of ESSER, putting on the operating budget, which then of course opens up money in ESSER, which we can spend on something unanticipated things. So.
Okay, thank you. Good report. Okay, so now we are moving on to action. In your packet, you have a list of subcommittee assignments. And hopefully everybody is comfortable with those subcommittees. I didn't think the new mayor would want to be on any.
I'm very comfortable.
Excellent. I do have a couple requested changes on the liaisons. With Sam being the liaison for Plum Cove, and Laura has been the liaison for information technology, which is a good fit with communications and all that. So Laura has requested to stay on information technology. So if anybody has other feedback on the liaison assignments, I think right now we're just approving the subcommittee assignments, since we have to approve the subcommittee assignments.
So I would ask Keith if he wants to be on any of the others. We're taking him off the one he was appointed.
Yeah.
Sorry, Um,
I'm just giving you more work down there.
Yeah, no, I was on the programs, right?
Yes, for subcommittee, yes.
Right.
And then the next page has kind of liaison, so.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the picture.
So the idea of these liaison assignments is particularly like with counselors through the budget process, we'll reach out to counselors in case they have, one, is there specific information we'd like them to make sure they have in our budget process so that when the budget comes before them, they have background on what our budget's all about. Or if they have questions, they have somebody they can contact directly. It doesn't mean you can't talk to anybody else. It just means that when we want information communicated, we do have kind of this roadmap of who should talk to who to make sure everybody gets touched.
Yeah, that sounds great. So with, looks like I'm with a mailing.
Yeah, okay, so with respect to budget, similar things, it's just so that we as a school committee kind of stay on in touch with what's going on at different schools. Also during the budget process in the past, we would try to figure out what might be bubbling up through the site council requests and things like that, although the way the process has been under Superintendent Lemus, it's been, very transparent, very, it kind of is happening in a natural way coming through him. But if there are things like if they're having a play or whatever, we can help amplify some of the good things.
So yeah, that sounds like a great way to reach out to the community. So I'm on board with that.
Okay.
Kathy, one thing about the case study, I noticed there's nobody next to it. Is it just not active yet, or?
It's not active right now.
If it does, I would like to be, and if it becomes more active, I would like to be part of that.
All right, and I put Gloucester 400 because I know Ben has communication with the 400 committee, but he also has a lot on his plate. And if there's any way that the school committee can kind of help with how our schools are connected with the 400 celebration, we can try to figure out how to be kind of a happy participant and partner in that.
I would love to be part of that as well, because I was actually gonna reach out, working with the businesses the way I do. I'd love to be part of the whole Gloucester 400 some way. It doesn't have to be through the school committee, but
It'd be helpful to have a school member as a representative. I try to go to some of the steering committee meetings. One of the real challenges is how to get the schools involved, considering we're dealing with COVID. It's just very, very hard. But there are probably other things that the schools can play a role in, more from that. So having someone there as well, one of you would be super helpful.
So between the two of us, we can figure out what activities, because they'll probably be ramping up even more as time, as the months are going along, because they need their planning in place. They're doing things like having Gloucester 400 patches on the school uniforms is one of the ideas. I mean, it's kind of some really cool things for the kids to connect also with 400 celebration.
So just onto the switch in the liaison. So Keith, what Kathy was saying is that I had asked to stay on IT because I was on that last time and I'm the chair. But so do you want to take the one that I was assigned to? That works, or?
Let's see, where's that?
healthy lifestyles and wellness.
Healthy lifestyles and wellness. Sure. Yeah,
There is officially.
you're doing a great job with the Facebook page. I know.
Oh, there is officially a wellness committee, which has different people. I don't think they've met in the past 12 months, but prior to COVID, there was some really good discussions. It's made up with some community partners as well. So representation from students, some staff, and then some community partner people.
Yeah, for example, partners.
Like generous gardeners, or not generous gardeners, sorry, backyard growers and people like that.
Sounds exciting.
All right. So we do need to approve these subcommittee assignments for going forward.
I'll make a motion. I move to approve the school liaison, sick bank, city council liaison assignments, and additional school committee liaison assignments as presented and discussed.
Second.
And also,
I'm sorry, did I say
You said subcommittee too.
Oh, you know what, did I say
I
something?
don't
I
think
don't
you
think
did.
I just read the title, so.
Go up
yeah,
about
no,
2
sorry.
pages.
Oh. Sorry, and the subcommittee assignments, as presented, sorry about that.
Okay, Sam seconded. Okay, any more discussion? Okay, Maria, roll call vote, please.
Chairperson Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Melvin,
Yes.
Mr. Minio,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Verga,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes,
and Ms. Weason.
Yes.
Okay, and the next item of action is a grant from the Gloucester Education Foundation in the amount of $2,500 for the Plum Cove 4th and 5th grade play. Do we have a
I
motion?
was accepted.
second,
So moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call vote, Maria?
Chairperson Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Melvin,
Yes.
Mr. Minio,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Verga,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
yes,
and Ms. Weason.
yes,
Carries unanimously. The next item of business is discussion of the communication, old and new business. The first item is the East Gloucester Veterans Memorial School Building Committee project update. And we have some real work going on at the site.
I have a photo, I can show you.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah. I have drone footage too, which is
really?
Even
not
better.
all that, well, it's not that exciting really. I'm showing the photo first just because that has some that has some words on it to explain what things are. So that's a picture of the site. So to pour something, the real work that's been, so there's a lot of site work and that's been completed in a sense that you're preparing the site to do the work. What you see now here, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit, they're pouring the foundations and footings and have been for a while now and are continuing that. So you see the beginning outlines of the school, forming the foundations. We have things like a concrete truck there, a lot of those, concrete pump truck here, okay. These are footings over here. This is the office trailer. This is where they're entering the site down here. That's been to improve ramp area. And then other important things, these are the protections of wetlands, very small wetlands on the site. So this is being protected here with sort of, the standard, walling off, fencing off and whatnot that we do. This here looks like a pool, but we don't have a pool on site. It's a temporary, it's a drainage to handle the direct, from water from the site and rain and precipitation to this area to keep the site, I guess, dry and sort of thing. That's a temporary settling basin. There'll be other basins that are created to deal with surface water, but this is just sort of the temporary piece of it. It's the reason I'm explaining this because it's a large feature right now, which is sort of when we first saw this at the building, we were like, what's that? But that's a settling basin that's temporary. So the pouring of the footings foundation will continue this month, and I believe steel will start seeing steel go up. Kathy, in February,
Mid-February.
mid-February. That's when things start to sort of take form there. So that's some update. Kathy, anything to add there?
So they say slabs will be poured in April and May, so the concrete at the base, and that framing will actually begin in late April. So we'll start seeing, what does look like buildings soon enough.
We have, that's pretty exciting. We have begun to discuss whether or not there should be a beam signing ceremony that happens on about half the projects that Deputy Rich does, and that might be a way to involve some of the students again. We have fantastic groundbreaking ceremonies, you all remember. So that's a possibility. We're just in the beginning discussions on that, whether we should do something like that. That would be April-ish, so it'd be a little warmer. Another thing that is happening is we're finalizing All the bid proposals came in last month, and they're working out the final acceptance of those with the various firms and contractor, not contractor firms and companies, everything from I won't get this right, but services and machinery and everything, windows and all the different pieces. But the general contractor and our OPM are sort of putting those in place, and the building committee. They're essentially awarding the bids. So I'm trying to get. They're awarding the bids for all the companies that will be helping build and working with the contractor. So that process has been going forward pretty thoroughly. I'm not doing a great job of describing right now, but we'll take some final steps on that at the building committee meeting tomorrow night.
Which is at 4 o'clock. And the bids did come in over budget by 500,000 between trades coming in over and non-trades coming in under. But the value engineering process, there's been identification of things that do not impact the educational plan. So given what we all know in the economy of certain materials and all that, there's costs that we're not, that are a result of, unfortunately, the times we're in.
Yeah.
But they're being managed and we're staying within budget.
And so some of the choice are things like different flooring surfaces, okay, which don't impact the nature of education, obviously, different planting, different exterior materials. So it's mostly materials pieces, reducing soffits, that sort of thing, with sort of architectural design elements as opposed to learning elements. It's actually quite impressive job that our construction project management team has been doing. And then helping us to make some good choices that keep things away from impacting the educational program. Considering how difficult this building's, building and is, and these days, and the cost increases that we've seen across all materials, it's a pretty remarkable job that we've been able to do. So it's good. And we haven't actually touched any, built into the budget our contingency funds, and we have not touched those yet. We've thought about it and keep on getting good advice. Don't touch those yet, and so we haven't.
Is it necessary to replace Jonathan with another school committee member on the building committee?
Jonathan has expressed his desire to stay on the building committee to the mayor. The mayor is the one who appoints the members.
Got it. So,
and there's a specific makeup of what representation needs to be on the building committee, like the contractor, there's certain city positions, and so.
And the requirement is based for one school committee.
Yeah. Okay. So it doesn't necessarily need to be two.
Right.
That's my
Exactly. Right.
question.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Got it.
So that project moves along, and everybody's still really excited, and they did do some at our building committee. Maybe at the meeting tomorrow, there was kind of the time lapse, which not it's all site work, but soon it'll start looking like things are growing out of the ground, which would be kind of cool. Okay. Next one is consideration of House Bill number 926.
So I need to ask you then, if we had sent a memo to Board of Health and the school committee, had sent a joint memo to DPW related to what our pesticide, what we're actually doing with pesticides in the schools. And as far as I know, we haven't heard back. So I don't know who contacts them to ask. Great.
Who contacts DPW?
Right, I mean, as a school committee member, I can't do that.
I know
So
somebody, but
you could, or Ben could.
Yeah. Ben, can we touch base tomorrow about that?
Sure.
So that was a joint memo from the Board of Health.
Yeah, I've read it in the packet, but I was unaware of the connection to DPW.
So this bill is sort of become secondary to the actual issue. So the bill was brought to us by someone who wanted us to endorse it. We went to the Board of Health saying, what do you want to do? They said, we want to know what Gloucester's plan is for pesticides in schools before we do anything with it. So the bill has sort of moved to the side a little bit, and the real question is getting some information about what the pesticide policy is on school properties. And then once the Board of Health knows that, then they're gonna make some decisions, and then we'll make decisions, and I don't know if the bill has gone through yet or not. But we felt it started a conversation that we felt was important anyway, to get some answers about what's happening.
Okay, fair enough. We'll get some info tomorrow.
So other new business, I have reached out to Dorothy Presser, who is our district contact from the Mass Association of School Committees. Every January or early February, we do a governance workshop. And we review our operating protocols and either adjust them or reaffirm them, kind of how we work together, and just basically kind of talks about who we are as a committee and how we want to do our business and all that. So she has, so she does some training also, kind of like initial training, that we can ask questions. What about this scenario? What about that scenario? So she talks about the role of the school committee relative to the superintendent, all the things that are good refreshers for everybody, no matter whether they've been on committee for a little while or a long while, okay? So she has asked what dates we might want to meet, if we'd want to do it prior to a school committee meeting. You know, meet at 5 and then go into school committee at 7, or a different date. The other date she's suggesting, she said she's available on February 2nd. I do not have my calendar to know what day of the week that is.
Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday.
We're in the midst of trying to plan a program subcommittee meeting for that day at 4. Keith, I don't know if you got my email about that, but so that was a request from these guys, because attendance works, maybe presenting, so that they make part,
Okay,
but it's not confirmed yet.
okay, so, okay,
So I'm just waiting to hear back.
Yeah, what time was it?
It's 4 o'clock on Wednesday, February 2nd, I believe. Let me go back to my notes. Is
Yeah,
that right?
that was it, yeah.
Yeah. So that would be for a program subcommittee meeting.
Are you gonna be meeting every meeting at 4 o'clock? That's
This was a request because of attendance works.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Not that I'm aware of, but this
if there was,
was.
I could meet it, I'd have to make arrangements for meeting that early.
So this is a special situation because an issue that we're dealing with, that we're working with a group who would be presenting to us related to an issue that would be coming in front of the subcommittee. Normally, we don't meet that early.
Mhm. Okay, it would be just a one-off, yeah.
I mean, would 5 o'clock be better? I can see if they can do 5 o'clock.
Yeah, that would be easier for me, but push comes to shove, I could try to make it happen.
I'll check. I'll send an email right now and see if they can do 5 o'clock.
Does that still work for you? though?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
okay, so
But that still makes that day.
So you're all set. So that is the date for programs regardless of the time of the day.
When is the next school committee?
Um,
Sounds like a good idea to have it before the school committee. Training.
Well, it becomes a very.
So
long-
she's suggesting like we would meet earlier and then we'd have kind of a long night, right?
Yeah.
So 2 hours of that and then a regular school committee meeting. Or do we want to pick a different day? And I can ask her for other dates.
I think other dates.
I agree with that.
Okay,
Yeah. That's a
All right.
very- that's a
And
very-
Bill, just so you know, our next school committee meeting, we're having a BNF meeting right before it, so we wouldn't be able to have this meeting.
yeah, so I was putting either February 9th or February 16th are the dates she threw out. Right, just saying that. Yeah.
We'll get there.
Okay, so I'll get some more dates. We're gonna wanna do it, at least in the month of February. And maybe by then, some things have occurred that might inform some of the discussion we have as well.
Yeah.
Some scenarios, so,
And we have the reputation
yes,
to think about too, which is.
absolutely.
And also, how does that mesh with the charting the course stuff that these guys do? Like, is it overlap? Should they do it first?
I think it's kind of separate.
Okay.
I think it's own training. Yeah. Okay, so I'll be back in touch via email for us to arrange a date that's agreeable to everybody. All right, is there any other new business that anybody wants to bring up?
I don't want to bloviate too long, but just sort of reiterate what I said at the city council meeting last night. First of all, looking forward to working with everybody. And it was 20 years ago, I was serving with Danette Berga, so it's kind of weird to be 20 years later. But as I mentioned at the council meeting, the intention is to meet the council president and vice president every other week and meet with our chair and vice chair on the opposite weeks. And then the five of us get together quarterly just to chat about things. So not just, we're meeting, not just school business, but also city side. So there's no surprises coming from any direction. And the idea is just be totally transparent and not everybody agreeing lockstep, but discussing, debating, and then pushing in the same direction all the time. So that's my hope for the next 2 years, and I'm looking forward to work with each and every one of you.
Great. So I think that concludes our meeting. We have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Maria, roll call vote, please.
Chairperson Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Melvin,
Yes.
Mr. Minio. Mr. Minio,
Yes. Oh, is my mic off? Yes.
No,
Ms.
just give me
Ms.
a-
Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Verga,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
and Ms. Weason.
Yes. Unanimous, of course. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria.